I juggled 4 different jobs just to pay for my girlfriend's master's degree, which meant spending my days dressed like a complete idiot selling hot dogs on the sidewalk. On the exact day she inherited a billion-dollar fortune, she showed up on the arm of a wealthy socialite and tossed $100,000 at me, telling me to name my price, as if my devotion was just a service fee. In that moment, sweat stung my eyes so badly that I couldn't tell if the burning was from the salt or my own bitterness. I took the cash and used it to buy out the small boba shop where we used to work part-time together. She expected me to go hide in a corner and sob, but she had no idea that once I stopped being her personal bank account, I finally found a girl who actually cherished me. When she eventually tried to come crawling back for a bowl of my homemade egg fried rice, I just smiled and told her that being slow to react didn't mean I was a fool. I was sweating buckets inside a suffocating hot dog mascot costume when a gleaming Maybach pulled up to the curb in front of me. Olivia Vance stepped out of the car with her first love, Caleb Miller, trailing right behind her. She stared at me while I was gasping for air inside that hot suit and told me that since I had helped her so much over the last 2 years, I should just name my price for the compensation. It was clear she was trying to make a clean break from our relationship. Before I could even get a word out, Caleb cut me off with a smirk and told me not to say anything pathetic like wanting to stay her boyfriend. He told me to take a good look at myself and ask if I really thought I was in her league. I watched as Olivia slid her hand into his, their fingers interlocking in a way that felt like a punch to my gut. The speech I had practiced died right there in my throat. I swallowed my pride and changed my tune, asking for $50,000 as a one-time settlement. The faint smile on Olivia's face vanished instantly as she stared at me with total disbelief. Back when the Vance family fortune was tied up in legal battles, I was the one who stepped up to be her boyfriend and support her. For 2 straight years, I slaved away at 4 different jobs just to make sure she had everything she needed. On the very day her family money was released, I was still out there in a giant hot dog suit, trying to scrape together enough for her next tuition payment. She had always carried herself like an untouchable ice queen who never let her emotions show. This was the first time I had ever seen her look genuinely irritated with me. I wondered if 50,000 was too small an amount, or if it felt like an insult to a Manhattan socialite of her status. Maybe it was too much, considering I had only spent about $20,000 supporting her over the last 2 years. But that money represented my entire life. Every single drop of sweat from making boba tea, handing out flyers, and washing dishes until dawn. However, Olivia Vance was nothing if not composed. By the time I had processed her initial shock, she had already regained her cool exterior. Through the mesh eye holes of my costume, her icy stare felt like it was trying to burn a hole right through me. Sweat trickled into my eyes, making them sting and water uncontrollably. Caleb let out a sharp laugh and told me I had a lot of nerve asking for 50,000. He remarked that everyone called me an idiot, but apparently I got smart the second there was real money on the table. I knew that when he said everyone, he really meant Olivia. She was constantly calling me a moron and telling me I didn't have a brain in my head. It wasn't my fault. A severe fever when I was a kid had left me just a step slower than everyone else. It didn't mess with my daily routine, but I definitely wasn't as sharp as the business majors at NYU. Just like right now, I couldn't think of a single clever thing to say back to him. Olivia raised her hand, and her driver instantly produced a thick envelope from the trunk of the car. She grabbed the envelope and practically slammed it against my chest, asking if 100,000 was enough for me. It turned out she had come prepared for this exact conversation. 100 grand, I guess I was worth more than I had originally thought. I simply nodded and told her it was enough. Olivia seemed taken aback for a second, her voice losing some of its edge as she asked if there was anything else I wanted. She started to say she might be able to help with other things, but I cut her off and whispered that there was nothing else. That was a lie, because there was definitely something else I wanted. I had spent weeks planning to ask her to stay with me forever, but seeing her fingers laced with Caleb's like that made all the fight go right out of me. In 2 years of being together, she had never once reached out to hold my hand. Unless I was the one clinging to her, she wouldn't even offer a hand to help me up if I tripped. You could be a little slow, but you have to know when you're no longer wanted. It was the same feeling I had when my parents died in that car crash years ago. When I saw my relatives trying to pass me off to one another, I made the choice to just walk into the foster care system on my own. This time, I was making the same choice to walk away. Olivia pressed her lips into a thin line and let out a sharp, cold laugh. She told me I was doing great, then paused to call me a complete and utter idiot one last time. With that final insult hanging in the air, she turned around and walked away with Caleb. The hot exhaust from the Maybach washed over me as they sped away. I ripped off the heavy mascot head and wiped my face with my sleeve. My skin was soaking wet, and I honestly couldn't tell if I was covered in sweat or tears. Suddenly, my mind flashed back to a humid, rainy afternoon 2 years prior. I had found her collapsed in a side alley, burning up with a fever. She looked so incredibly vulnerable and lost in that moment. Seeing her like that reminded me exactly of how I felt as a kid. Her father and stepmother had fled the country and left her behind with all their assets frozen by the government. The girl who was once the darling of the social scene had lost everything overnight. Her friends wouldn't take her calls, and Caleb wouldn't even open his front door for her. People whispered and pointed at her everywhere she went in the city. There I was, a guy who could barely pay his own rent, taking her back to my place. I told Olivia that I would be the one to take care of her. She sat on the floor of my tiny apartment and sobbed like a broken doll. Her voice, which was usually so melodic, was so hoarse I could barely recognize it. She asked me if I even knew who she was. I told her I knew, and that I worked at the boba shop right by her campus. She gave me a look of pure disdain, probably thinking I was just some creep trying to take advantage of her situation. To be honest, I did everything in my power to look after her. She hadn't eaten in 3 days and had spent an entire night shivering in the rain outside Caleb's place. She was so frail that a light breeze probably would have knocked her down. I had been doing manual labor my whole life, so I was plenty strong enough to help her. I basically stayed by her side in my little rental for 2 weeks straight to make sure she was okay. I wouldn't even let her take a sip of water without checking to make sure the temperature was perfect. After that, Olivia just ended up staying with me. As a pampered princess, she didn't have the slightest clue how the real world worked or how to earn a living. She became completely dependent on me for everything. I spent my mornings delivering for Amazon, my lunches bussing tables, my afternoons at the boba shop, and my nights doing food delivery. Every once in a while, she would look at me with something resembling pity. She asked why I was being so good to her when I was only making my own life more difficult. But for the most part, she remained completely indifferent to my efforts. She had no clue that in my 20 years on this earth, my parents were the only people who had ever truly cared for me. They loved me unconditionally and did everything for me without expecting a single thing back. Since I was with Olivia now, it was only natural that I would give her my all. Lucas, you were supposed to be stocking the new shipment, so why are you spacing out again? That makes the 3rd time you have caught yourself daydreaming today. My manager's voice snapped me out of my thoughts and back to the present. I shook it off and rushed out to the curb. The delivery van was already parked and waiting. I let out a grunt as I hoisted 2 heavy crates of milk concentrate onto my shoulders. As I turned around, I came face to face with Olivia. Caleb was right there with her, his arm draped casually over her shoulders. He was suggesting they try out a new French place for dinner that evening. He mentioned a friend liked it, even though it was only a few $100 a person and probably wouldn't compare to their trips to Paris. It was obvious that Olivia had spotted me too. She faltered for a split second before looking away and giving Caleb a warm, sweet smile as she agreed. I realized then that for a girl used to fine French dining, surviving on my egg fried rice for 2 years must have been a nightmare. Yet back then, she always devoured it like she hadn't eaten in weeks. Caleb pointed me out and asked if that idiot actually worked at the shop. Caleb looked me up and down with a sneer before glancing at the store's sign. He laughed at the name Campus Sips and mocked the fact that a place like this even existed near NYU. He leaned in close to Olivia and whispered loudly, asking if she thought the $2 drinks would give someone food poisoning. I kept my eyes on Olivia and snapped back that of course they wouldn't. Olivia used to drink those exact teas every time I brought them home for her. She used to complain about how cheap and low-class they were, but she always finished every last drop. I could tell the memory was hitting her just as hard as it hit me. She looked mortified as she avoided my eyes and hurried Caleb away from the shop. Back inside, my manager asked why my girlfriend was walking around campus with some other guy. Olivia had always made a point of acting like she didn't know me in public. We had kept our relationship a total secret from everyone. But just last month, during a massive downpour, she had actually waited for me under a street lamp with an umbrella. My manager had seen her that night and teased me about how lucky I was to have such a beautiful girlfriend. It was the first time since my parents passed away that anyone had called me lucky. I remember being so happy I couldn't stop smiling as I ran through the rain to get to her. She just shoved the umbrella into my chest and called me an idiot for not checking the weather forecast. Even so, I was absolutely thrilled. She had come all that way just to bring me an umbrella, even if she didn't want to walk under it with me. I was naive enough to think that maybe, just maybe, she actually cared about me. My manager saw me spaced out again and decided to let the subject drop. He sighed at the books and admitted that after another month in the red, he didn't think he could keep the shop open. In a city as pricey as New York, selling a $2 iced tea felt like some kind of social crime. Business had been absolutely abysmal for weeks. I set the crates down and looked at my boss with a new sense of purpose. I asked him if that offer to sell the shop for $50,000 was still on the table. The amount I had asked Olivia for wasn't just some random number I pulled out of thin air. I had every intention of buying this business for myself. I hadn't even stopped to consider whether I would end up losing money in the long run. I just felt that if there were people in this world who could drop $200 on dinner, there had to be people who could only afford a $2 drink. My boss was more than happy to take the deal. On the day I officially took over the lease, Olivia made a special trip just to laugh in my face. She asked me if I had finally lost my mind completely. She pointed out that my overhead would be higher than my profits and predicted the place would be bankrupt within 3 months. I just kept wiping down the tables without looking up and told her that it didn't really matter to me. My complete lack of interest in her opinion seemed to catch her off guard. She was about to keep going when her phone started ringing in her bag. I didn't need to see the screen to know it was Caleb calling her. She shot me one last dirty look before answering the call and rushing out the door. I have to admit, her words stung a little bit. It was clear Olivia had completely forgotten the things she used to tell me. I remembered coming home exhausted and complaining about some jerk who had given me a hard time at the restaurant. Our relationship dynamic had always been pretty one-sided like that. I would talk her ear off, and she would usually just shut me down with some biting sarcasm. But that one time, she stared at a burn on my hand for the longest time before telling me that one day she would make me the boss so I wouldn't have to work so hard anymore. That was the moment I realized there was more to life than just being someone else's employee. Her insults today actually served as a helpful reminder of something important. I definitely needed to hire some help. You can't exactly call yourself a boss if you don't have any staff to manage. I grabbed a scrap of cardboard and used a thick marker to write out a help wanted sign. I was standing there with a piece of tape in my teeth, ready to post the sign on the front window. Suddenly, a pair of slim, pale hands reached out and took the sign right from me. I turned around to find a thin girl standing right behind me. She gestured to the cardboard and asked if the job was still available since she was a local student. She had a mask on and her hair was pulled back into a basic ponytail. Her gray shirt was clearly old and faded, but she looked very put together and professional. Just like that, I hired Maya Brooks on the spot for $12 an hour in cash. I was officially running my own business now. 3 days into my ownership, the shop was still completely dead. Maya didn't have any customers to serve, so she just sat at the counter reading some book with a title I couldn't even say. After I let out my 5th heavy sigh in under 5 minutes, she finally looked up from her page. She shut her book and suggested we take some coolers down to the basketball courts to sell to the thirsty players. My face lit up, and I told her to prep 20 cups immediately so we could head out. The campus was hosting a major tournament, and the bleachers were packed with students. We both struggled to haul the heavy styrofoam coolers across the grass. The city was in the middle of a brutal heat wave that made every breath feel like fire. Despite the heat, every single seat in the stands was taken. Caleb was dominating the court, weaving through defenders and sinking a perfect three-pointer. The crowd of girls watching him went absolutely wild after that shot. Right there in the front row, surrounded by her little circle, sat Olivia. She had one person holding an umbrella over her head and another pointing a fan at her while she sipped on a drink. It was a clear reminder that the whole world bows down to you once you have enough money. She was a far cry from the lonely, broken girl who only had me to turn to. Maya took the lead and navigated us toward the front of the bleachers. She whispered that we should target the players as soon as the buzzer sounded since they would be the most desperate for a drink. She knew that once the athletes started buying from us, the rest of the crowd would follow suit. I nodded in agreement before pausing to ask her which one of us was actually the boss here. She told me no way was she going first, so we agreed I would handle the guys while she handled the girls. We shook on the deal and got to work. When the whistle blew, I headed toward the bench and locked eyes with Olivia immediately. We both looked away instantly, sharing a silent agreement to pretend we didn't know each other. She clearly didn't want her new friends to know she had any connection to a guy like me. I had zero interest in trying to sell anything to her group of wealthy friends anyway. Caleb, however, wasn't about to let me walk away without making a scene. As he walked off the court, he intentionally slammed his shoulder into mine. I didn't see it coming, and the cooler went flying, splashing lemon tea all over the place. He started shouting about how I had ruined his expensive shoes. Caleb looked down at the sticky stains on his sneakers with a look of pure rage. He yelled that his $800 shoes were worth more than my entire life. His outburst was loud enough to make everyone in the stands stop and stare. Olivia stepped over to him without so much as a sideways glance in my direction. She looked at Caleb with total concern and asked him what had happened. He lied and said I was acting like a maniac with the cooler and ran right into him. Only after his explanation did Olivia finally bother to look at me. Her eyes were cold and filled with nothing but disappointment and blame. She asked me if a basketball court was really the most appropriate place for me to be running my little business. I might be a slow talker, but I wasn't about to let him lie about what happened. I told her flat out that he was the one who hit me and he should be the one apologizing. I also pointed out that he owed me for the ruined drinks he had knocked over. I knew for a fact that she had seen the whole thing happen. Even knowing the truth, her immediate instinct was still to take his side over mine. I have dealt with a lot of unfair treatment throughout my life. Usually, though, that kind of behavior comes from people who don't matter to me. This was the first time that someone's cruelty actually caused me physical pain. I did my best to keep my voice from shaking as I demanded an apology. She saw my eyes welling up, and she seemed to freeze in place for a moment. Ever since Olivia became part of my life, I had been so happy that no hardship really bothered me. I felt like there was never anything worth crying over. I used to just laugh off the rude customers and the long, exhausting shifts. I wouldn't even let myself cry in front of her on the day she dumped me. Seeing me like this actually seemed to make her feel a bit uneasy. She looked like she was about to say something to me. But Caleb cut her off before she could speak. He tilted his head back and asked me if I was actually as dumb as I looked. He told me that even if he had done on purpose, a guy like him would never apologize to someone like me. Olivia used to lecture me on morality, but now she seemed to only care about Caleb's version of the truth. She hesitated for a second before shoving some cash into my hand. She told me that's just how he was and that I wasn't going to get an apology out of him. She told me to just take the money and consider the matter settled. It was actually a significant amount of money. Back in the day, that much cash would have covered our rent and groceries for weeks. I just stood there looking at the spilled tea and the broken cooler, feeling speechless. Maya walked over and started picking up the pieces of the cooler while telling me it was time for us to leave. She reminded me that we still had to get more drinks ready for the next half of the game. She stepped in front of me, using her small frame to shield me from everyone's mocking stares. I felt pretty low after that encounter. I felt like a wilted plant as I walked back to the shop with my head hanging low. I didn't feel any better until Maya told me that she had successfully sold every single one of her drinks. That news gave me an immediate boost of energy. However, I was still covered in sticky tea and sweat. Maya refused to let me go back out there for the rest of the game. She took it upon herself to make several trips back and forth with fresh drinks. She managed to sell out every single time she went back. Pretty soon, we had a line of guys coming into the shop just to buy boba from her. They were all trying to act cool while nudging each other to ask for her phone number. That was the moment I finally realized something. Maya had taken her mask off, and she was absolutely stunning. About a month passed before Olivia showed up at the shop again. She walked in looking a bit unsure of herself and asked me for the recipe for my egg fried rice. Back when we were broke, every single penny we saved went directly toward her tuition. We had lived on nothing but egg fried rice for an entire month. It was the only thing we could afford that actually kept us full. I used to do what my mom did and hide the best parts of the meal at the bottom of her bowl. I would dish out my plain portion first and then add extra eggs to the pan for her serving. Now that she was back to eating at five-star restaurants, she seemed to be craving that simple comfort food. She told me her family had hired 3 world-class chefs, but none of them could get the flavor right. She actually called me boss and asked if I would make it for her one last time. Maya stepped in and told me she thought there was a discrepancy in yesterday's books. I left Olivia standing in the middle of the shop and went over to the register. I went over the numbers a few times, but I couldn't find anything wrong. Maya patiently pointed out that the number of cut boxes we received didn't match the supplier's invoice. She said she was concerned the supplier might be trying to rip us off. I realized I had completely forgotten to do an inventory count the day before. I started calling myself stupid because those cups were actually pretty expensive for a small business. I was so annoyed with my own mistake that I couldn't stop sighing. Maya just gave me a kind smile and told me that everyone makes mistakes sometimes. She told me not to worry about it and said she would check the cameras and handle the phone call. I gave her a grateful nod for taking care of it for me. I could see Olivia out of the corner of my eye, watching the two of us with a dark, unreadable expression. She just stood there staring at the two of us for what felt like an eternity. By the time my second month of ownership rolled around, we were actually in the black. I knew that our success was entirely due to Maya's hard work. It wasn't just her looks that brought people in through the door. She had actually built a custom delivery app to handle orders from all over the campus. I took charge of making all the actual deliveries to the dorm buildings. I was so incredibly thankful for everything she was doing. I gave her a light pat on the shoulder and told her I was giving her a $500 bonus. She was in the middle of eating her fried rice, and my sudden announcement made her jump. She accidentally choked on a bite and had to turn away to clear her throat. I noticed that even the tips of her ears had turned a bright shade of red. I quickly asked her if she needed a glass of water. She shook her head and said that since I fed her every day, she only wanted her basic hourly pay. The shop had become incredibly hectic lately, especially during the lunch and dinner rushes. It was just easier for me to cook a huge batch of fried rice and bring some in for her. After a month of regular meals, she finally started looking a bit more healthy. She didn't look nearly as frail as she did when I first hired her. She had a much better color in her cheeks than before. Naturally, this just meant even more guys were coming around to flirt with her. We even had students from other schools showing up just to catch a glimpse of her. I couldn't force her to take the money, so I decided to find another way to thank her. Seeing her in the same 2 worn-out shirts and ragged shoes every day gave me a better idea. I spent my day off heading down to the local shopping mall. I found 2 nice dresses on the clearance rack and a pair of shoes on sale, spending a few $100 in total. I was coming down the escalator with my bags when I ran straight into Olivia and Caleb. She was loaded down with designer bags and was smiling sweetly at something Caleb was saying. Caleb was complaining about how the mall was too low class and that none of the stores were good enough for her. That was when he caught sight of me. He asked me what I was doing there and if my pathetic little shop had finally gone under. He mocked me by asking if I was back to working entry-level service jobs. I lifted my shopping bags and told him to mind his own business since I had as much right to shop there as anyone else. I saw Olivia's face drop the second she saw what I was carrying. She stared at the bags and demanded to know who I was buying clothes for. I told her once again that my personal life was none of her concern. I could tell that Olivia recognized the brand on the bags. It was a store that had been way out of our budget just a year ago. I remembered spending nearly $200 on a jacket for her birthday back then. Why I had finally given it to her. She hadn't even bothered to look at it. She had told me I was wasting my time because the jacket wasn't her style. Maybe it was my slow nature or just the fact that I was used to being treated like I didn't exist. I had never expected much in the way of gratitude from her anyway. But not even getting a thank you that day had really hurt my feelings. Olivia pulled her arm away from Caleb and stormed over to grab me by the sleeve. She warned me not to tell her that I was buying those clothes for the poor girl who worked for me. Maya might not have much money, but she was a genuine person. More importantly, she was someone I considered a real friend. To be honest, she was the first person in my entire life who treated me like a friend. Growing up, kids were always calling me names and playing mean tricks on me. I never had anyone who actually wanted to hang out with me. Eventually, I started believing all the nasty things they said about me. I got into the habit of calling myself an idiot every time I made the slightest mistake. But Maya was always there to tell me that making mistakes was just part of being human. She made me feel like I wasn't actually a lost cause. I stood my ground and told her that yes, I bought them for her, and asked if she had a problem with that. Olivia was visibly shaking with rage and breathing hard. Caleb saw how upset she was and shot me a look of pure venom. He sneered that a moron and a peasant girl were a perfect match for each other. He mocked us, saying we'd be perfectly happy living on cheap food and wearing bargain bin clothes. He said that people like us were lucky that it took so little to make us happy. That comment seemed to hit Olivia a lot harder than he intended. She was probably remembering all those nights we spent struggling just to get by. She spun around and screamed at him to shut up. Caleb looked completely shocked by her sudden outburst. She looked down and asked me, in a low, angry voice, if I thought I was some kind of saint. She asked if my goal in life was to find every pathetic person in the city and give them everything I had. I told her that was exactly what I had done for her when she was at her lowest. She had always used my best qualities as a way to make fun of me. I honestly didn't get what her problem was. I thought you were supposed to be good to the people you cared about. I could see that my words had actually managed to sting her for once. I used that moment of silence to pull my arm away and walk away from them. I thought I could hear her starting to cry as I headed for the exit. She called out and asked if I was really so desperate that I would take anyone who was willing to stay. I didn't even bother giving her an answer. The truth was that Maya wasn't just anyone to me. In the beginning, I really had loved Olivia with all my heart. Maya hadn't been showing up for her shifts lately. Every time I texted her to check in, she had some new excuse for why she couldn't come in. The weird part was that the tea was always brewed and ready when I opened up each morning. The ice machine would already be full, and the shop would be perfectly clean. It felt like I had a ghost employee taking care of everything behind the scenes. Without Maya there to run things, the shop's sales started to take a major hit. I was surprised to find that Olivia had become my most regular customer. She acted like she was just there to witness my failure, but she always looked deeply troubled. She would call out my name with that same old mocking tone. She asked if the poor girl had finally wised up and realized what a moron I was. She told me that not everyone I helped would be as loyal as she was for sticking around for so long. I just put my headphones on and cranked the music up to drown her out. I wanted to block her out of my life completely. Just as the song started, I thought I heard her say something else. It sounded like she was promising never to call me names again if I would just come back. The music was too loud for me to catch the rest of whatever she was trying to say. I finally discovered the truth about Maya's situation a week later. I overheard some students talking while they were waiting for their orders. They mentioned that the pretty girl who used to work at the shop had been spending all her time at the dean's office. Apparently, someone with a lot of influence had managed to get her scholarship revoked. The Vance family had offered to pay her way, but she had turned them down flat. Now she was desperately trying to appeal the decision with the university administration. The fact that it was so sudden and involved the Vances made it obvious who was responsible. My mind went straight to Olivia and what she was capable of doing. Before I could even go find Olivia to scream at her, Maya showed up at the shop. She looked like she was on the verge of a total collapse. She didn't say a word to me and just started cleaning the counters with her head down. I asked her if she needed an advance on her paycheck or any extra cash. I told her I could just give her some money since I didn't really need the extra cash anyway. She didn't even look at me and just kept scrubbing at a stubborn spot on the table. I asked her if Olivia had been the one to come and talk to her. The question finally got a reaction out of her. Her lips started to quiver as she admitted that Olivia had indeed visited her. Olivia had offered to cover every single one of her college expenses from start to finish. The only catch was that Maya had to agree never to see me again. She looked at me and admitted that she had actually been very tempted by the offer. She talked about how hard her life was and how that money could have changed everything for her. She looked me right in the eyes, and I could see the pain she was in. I told her that she should have taken it because it would have solved all her problems. I told her she deserved to have an easier life than the one she was living. She didn't say anything for a while as her eyes filled with tears. She told me she had thought long and hard about it, but ultimately turned Olivia down. She joked that if she left, she knew my shop wouldn't last a week without her. I never quite figured out how Maya managed to fix everything with the university. She kept her scholarship and continued to be the top student in every one of her classes. It was only fair since she was easily the smartest person I knew. Things went back to normal, and we settled back into our happy little routine at the shop. The closer Maya and I became, the more erratic Olivia's behavior seemed to get. She started showing up at the shop almost every other afternoon. Nothing seemed to set her off more than seeing Maya enjoying a bowl of my fried rice. Her voice would actually shake with pure jealousy whenever she saw us together. She would ask Maya if she had lost her mind by hanging around a loser like me. She kept insulting Maya's intelligence and questioning her choices in life. Maya finally reached her breaking point and decided to stop being so nice. She looked Olivia in the eye and asked if being a bully was the only way she knew how to show she cared. I wasn't entirely sure what Maya meant by that specific comment. I just remember Olivia's entire face turning a deep shade of crimson. She didn't say another word before turning tail and running out of the shop. I asked Maya about it later that evening. I asked her if it really was stupid of me to be so kind to people. She just gave me a warm smile and told me I wasn't doing anything wrong. She said Olivia just wasn't the kind of person who deserved someone as genuine as me. I had never seen Maya look as beautiful as she did in that moment. Her eyes crinkled up and looked even brighter than the stars in the sky. As fall set in, the entrance to the campus was buried under a blanket of red leaves. One morning, Maya didn't show up for her shift. I started asking around and found out that there had been some kind of emergency with her family. I didn't have any of the details, but I dropped everything and headed straight to the hospital. I found Maya sitting alone on a bench in a dimly lit hallway with her head in her hands. She looked completely hollow, just staring at the floor tiles with vacant eyes. I had never seen her look so defeated in all the time I had known her. Seeing her like that brought back memories of Olivia's darkest days and made my heart ache. She saw me approaching and silently slid over to make some room on the bench. I sat down next to her without saying a word. We just sat there together in the silence of the hospital corridor. After what felt like hours, she finally started to talk. She told me about a boy from her old neighborhood who used to be really kind to her when she was a kid. His family had nothing. His mom passed away when he was little, and his dad was always away working construction. He had to drop out of school early just to work the fields and help his family survive. By the time he was 16, he was working the same back-breaking construction jobs as his father. They barely made $10,000 a year between them, and every cent went toward paying off old medical bills. A few years back, his dad had a terrible accident on site where a metal rod severed an artery in his leg. After hours of surgery, while his dad was still in critical condition, the boy went up to the hospital roof. He ended up falling into a snowdrift, and they didn't find his frozen body until the next morning. I wasn't sure why she was sharing such a grim story, but it made me terrified for her mental state. I asked her why she was thinking about that boy now and if she was okay. She finally turned her head to look me in the eyes. She suddenly collapsed into my arms and curled up against me. She hid her face in my shoulder and started to sob uncontrollably. I found out later that her mother, her only living relative, had been working double shifts at a factory. She had been so exhausted that she accidentally got her hand caught in one of the machines. She was currently in critical condition and fighting for her life. I gathered every single cent I had to my name, including the spare change in my pockets. It came out to about $40,000, and I handed all of it over to her. She didn't turn me down, but she insisted on only taking 10,000 of it. She promised me that she would pay back every penny as soon as she could, and she was a woman of her word. A year after we graduated, she paid me back 10 times the amount I had given her. To this day, I still wonder if that story was really about a neighbor or if it was her own story. The money helped cover the costs, and her mom eventually stabilized and moved to a regular recovery room. Her mother was a sweet lady whose face told the story of a lifetime of hard work. Even after everything, her eyes were still as clear and bright as Maya's. She took a liking to me immediately and started calling me Lucas, honey. She noticed my slow reactions, but she never once looked at me with pity or judgment. She just smiled and told Maya that she didn't think I was slow at all. She mentioned that Maya was always raving on the phone about my amazing egg fried rice. She said that it takes a special kind of person to do the simple things in life so well. She reminded me so much of my own mother, who used to tell me I was the smartest boy in the world. It caught me off guard that Maya had actually been talking about me to her mom. I turned to look at Maya, who was standing right there. Her ears turned bright red as she cleared her throat and tried to change the subject as fast as she could. I kept the shop closed for a full week while things settled down. It didn't take very long for Olivia to track me down at the hospital. There was something different about the way she was looking at me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Her expression was a complicated mess of emotions that I wasn't even going to try to figure out. She asked me if I was just some kind of professional pushover. She demanded to know why I was giving Maya money, and if she was actually worth all my trouble. Her constant questioning was starting to give me a real headache. I decided to only answer her last question and told her that Maya was absolutely worth it. I told her that being good to Maya was exactly what I wanted to do. I even offered her the remaining $30,000 in my bank account if she was so worried about money. Olivia's face lit up, and she claimed she knew all along that I was still in love with her. She said she knew I would still give up everything just to make her happy. I shook my head and told her it was simply because she had overpaid me when I asked for that $50,000. She looked like she was about to explode with anger as she stared at me. She screamed at me, wanting to know what she even meant to me anymore. I cut her off and reminded her that I had once given her that same level of devotion. I could see the pain and realization finally hitting her. She asked me with a sad look if I just had a thing for taking in pathetic people. She compared my kindness to someone who just likes rescuing stray animals. I honestly thought she was the one being slow for not understanding what I was trying to say. I was completely finished having this conversation with her. I tried to step around her so I could get back to Maya's room. She threw her arm out and blocked me from moving past her. She begged me to tell her why I couldn't just love her again. She promised to never insult me again and said that since she was rich now, we could both live a perfect life together. I looked her in the eye and told her that her offer wasn't good enough. I pointed out that even as she was begging, she was still looking down on me. I admitted that I used to take every tiny crumb of affection she gave me and trick myself into thinking it was a feast. But I told her that those days were officially over. I told her that I had finally realized I wasn't as dumb as she always said I was. I had finally found someone who saw me as an equal rather than a subordinate. I finally understood that my mother was right about how real love is supposed to work. I had no idea if my words were actually sinking in for her. When I moved her hand out of my way, she didn't even try to resist. It felt like all the air had been let out of her tires. Maya was standing right there by the door when I walked back. I wasn't sure if she had overheard my final confrontation with Olivia. She reached out and took my hand, lacing her fingers tightly through mine. It felt like she was terrified that I might actually walk away from her. She didn't need to worry about that at all. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe, and I had no intention of ever letting go. Once we were inside the room, she finally released her grip on me. My hand was sweaty and my chest felt like it was tied in knots. Without looking at me, she whispered that she was worried I might actually take Olivia back. I just laughed and told her that I wasn't that big of a fool. From that day forward, Maya never left my side for a single moment. I even gained a new mother figure in her mom. I finally learned that being happy shouldn't feel like you're constantly waiting for the floor to fall out. I realized that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to deserve love. I finally understood that if you give your whole heart to someone, they might just give theirs back to you. True clarity is not about trading humble sacrifices for someone's pity, but about possessing the strength to walk away after seeing through the masks of betrayal and finding a gentle soul who sees your perceived simplicity as a treasure and chooses to share the quiet warmth of an ordinary life by your side.